It's a blessing to be able to share with y'all today. When I was a youth pastor, this was the one Sunday that I could always count on. I'd have the opportunity to preach because it was Labor Day weekend and there was fewer people, so the senior pastor would let me preach on those days. So you still get me to preach today, which is great. I'm excited to be up here with y'all. We've been in a series for the last month or so dealing with the family, and today's actually the last sermon in that series. And actually, at some point, you get to the moment where you're just kind of saying, please stop talking about family, talk about something else. Because sometimes what happens is things get a little too personal, and that's not really where I want to be today. But I do want to just point out that as we talk about the family, I'm not always just talking about the address that you live in, your home. Actually, we are all a part of a family. The role that we play within this family is incredibly important. So some of you in this family, you're going to be there more as an encouragement and support to someone else. And my goal today is simply to help us recognize that we all have a role within our family. Over the past several weeks, we've looked at different aspects of the family. And one of the things we've talked about is the fact that every family is a little bit different. Some families seem to be perfect, but the reality is I've never seen one that really was perfect. Even historical figures like John Wesley or even King David, they had far from perfect families. Actually, that's a little bit encouraging to me. Have you ever felt like your family was a disaster? Like there was nothing that was right within your family. My kids aren't making the best choices, and I haven't really been the best leader within that home. Yet David also could have said the same thing about his family. But David is referred to as a man after God's own heart. And it will be through his bloodline that Jesus Christ will actually come. And then I think of John Wesley, who would become one of the greatest catalysts within the Protestant church, yet he was really not that strong of a family man. So maybe if David could turn out okay and John Wesley could turn out okay, maybe my family will turn out pretty well also. You know, every family has its struggles. Some of our families have experienced great hardship and loss, and it's been completely out of our control. Maybe it was brought about by death or some sort of disease, or maybe even someone losing a job. Some of us grew up in homes where they were nurtured and loved, and it was just incredibly compassionate all the time. Others come from broken homes that are filled with conflict and neglect and sometimes even distance. Some of us even get a little bit uneasy. The fact that I'm still talking about family stuff, it makes you uncomfortable because it reminds you of some of the brokenness that was present in your own home. Yet regardless of our background, God's word gives us a blueprint for what a Christ-centered family should look like. Today, as a part of this message, we're going to be looking at a passage from Hebrews chapter 6, and specifically we're going to be looking at the one role that we've neglected in this series, which is the role of children. And I do just want to add that once you're a child, you're always a child, which means that I'm not just talking to the kids who were in middle school, in high school, or even college. Actually, regardless of where we are, we still have a role within the family, and I still have an adult mom, and even though I'm in my 50s, I still see myself as her child, and my role is still incredibly important. So the purpose of this is to say that this message is not intended for someone else. It's intended for you. It's intended for me. Actually, there's a part of me that wishes my kids were here. They are with my in-laws. My wife took them for the weekend. And the one time that I'm going to talk about why my kids need to obey their parent, they're not here today, but hopefully they'll listen to it online somewhere down the way. Last week I had Jared share, and he was in Ephesians chapter 5 as Paul instructs husbands and wives on how they should love and support one another. And we find ourselves just a few verses away today in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Now, as we look at this passage today, it should also be noted that Paul never had a wife and he never had kids. It's kind of funny that here we are, we're going to take his advice on how we ought to be living as parents when he was never a parent himself. I will tell you this, although Paul did not have children and he did not have a wife, he knew the author of the family. And he knew what the Old Testament Word of God said about what it takes to live together and to bring honor to the Lord. So he didn't have to have all those experiences. He could simply allow the Word to dictate what a family should look like. In this passage, Paul shows us that a healthy home is not built merely on human wisdom, but on God's design. If children and parents will obey God's word, the home becomes not just a shelter, but in many ways a testimony of the gospel. So again, I'm in Ephesians chapter 6, I'm messing that up left and right. Ephesians chapter 6 today, and the goal is to look at both children and parents. Beginning in verse 1, it says this: "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." Now, the first thing I want you to see today is that God himself instituted the family. It wasn't our idea. It wasn't society's way of trying to organize things. God actually had a plan in place from the very beginning. He created the family. When God created Adam and Eve, he gave them instructions to be fruitful and to multiply. The plan was always for them to have children who could do chores and grab them something out of the kitchen when Dad was sitting on the... That's not really, I hear the amens, I appreciate that. Actually, that's not really the reason that we have family. Actually, God created the family to bring honor to him. The family was designed as a foundation to society. When a society or even a church is made up of healthy families, you can be assured that this society and this church will be healthy as well. I remember many years ago, while I was pastoring in North Carolina, there was a tragic event that took place in our town. There was a young lady from the local elementary school who had some special needs, and she had been lured into an abandoned house where she was tortured, raped, and murdered. It actually took a couple days for the authorities to find her, but when they did, what made things worse was the discovery that the perpetrators were other kids from her school. In that moment, my heart broke for the young lady and the family that remained. But I was also forced to wrestle with the question of what went wrong in those other kids' lives. What kind of homes had they grown up in where such behavior might be considered acceptable? Now, I just want to start by saying, I recognize, y'all have heard me say this before, as a parent, you can do everything right in front of your kids, but they still can make choices that dishonor the Lord. The reality is, at some point, they're responsible for their own choices, but you do have the responsibility to teach them. And apparently in these kids' lives, somewhere along the way, they learned something that was not acceptable. I wish this was an isolated event. The sad reality is that just a quick glimpse of news reports this week included carjacking, rape, armed robbery, and murder, all actions committed by teenagers on our local news. So unhealthy families yield unhealthy communities. But let me give you the opposite side of that as well. Healthy families lead to healthy communities. So yeah, there's the negative side that if people do dumb things and they pass it on to the next generation, it's going to hurt the next generation. But on the other side is if you choose to honor the Lord and you pass that on to the next generation, it's a beautiful thing. We've got a family in the church here, and I just picked them somewhat randomly. Part of it's because I'm connected with some of the family as well. Y'all know Daly, who leads our worship stuff up here? She's an incredible young lady. Her mom attends our church and serves the Lord faithfully. Her grandmother attends our church and serves the Lord faithfully. Her sister attends our church and serves the Lord faithfully. Her sister's kids attend the church, and now they even serve by singing in the choir, and they're serving the Lord faithfully. The point is that if one chooses to be healthy, and they pass that on to the next generation, and then to the next generation, health produces health. And if the family is healthy, then the church community also will be healthy. It simply makes sense. That doesn't mean that these are perfect families that I just mentioned to you. In fact, at times, every parent has likely felt like a failure, and every child has likely made foolish decisions that have brought about unhealthy consequences. But the point is that healthy families can become the backbone of a healthy church. I want to get back to the passage here this morning. Again, I read it to you already from Ephesians 6, 1 through 4, as it reveals the biblical responsibilities of the family. And in the first 3 verses, we see instructions to the children. Again, I want to emphasize this is not just for the young kid, but the adult kid that is in many of us. The first thing that we see here is a call to obedience. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Now, I will tell you that as a parent, I absolutely love this verse. In fact, I want my kids to know it, and I will tell them about it over and over and over again. I want my kids to respect me and to do exactly what I say. And there is incredible value in this. But before we get to the kid part of this, I know we're going to deal with parents later. I feel like I need to deal with the parent part of this moment. Kids are being instructed to obey what their parents are teaching them. But with that comes a huge responsibility on me as a dad. I know that the parent part of this comes later in the service, but do you recognize the danger in this? Our kids are being instructed to blindly follow what we teach them, to simply trust that we are going to point them in the right direction. Do you realize how important it is that you point them in the right direction? That you lead by example. I need to make sure that whatever it is that I teach them, whatever I instruct them to do, that it brings honor and glory to the Lord. Y'all have heard me say it before, but this is the most important thing that any parent will ever do. It is to point our children to Jesus Christ. We need to make sure we're doing our part. If my kids are going to blindly follow me and simply trust that whatever I say is right, and there was a time that my kids did believe that. If our kids are going to simply trust that whatever I lead them in, it will be right, I better make sure that it's right. It's incredibly important. The other part of this is what I just referenced as a somewhat blind call to obedience. This is for the kid or for the child, which again could be an adult. It's not a call that is dependent upon mom and dad's perfection. As we look at verse 1, it doesn't say if this, then this. It simply says you must obey. It's not a call for them to be perfect. Instead, it's a realization that these are the parents that God gave you. And whether you like them or not, and there may be days you don't, you have a responsibility to obey them. And I know that this may be hard for some of us to understand, but there are times that your parents actually do know what they're talking about. I have teenage kids. I know it's been a long time since I was a teenager, but I was a teenager. And I know that there are other things that have changed in our world, but I still know the way people think because I was a teenager. The reality is, I may know a thing or two about the way the world works as well. Maybe it would benefit my kids to listen and obey. Let me also suggest that this call to obedience is not merely about the present circumstances that my kids find themselves in today. The call to obedience within the family also serves as a reflection of the call to obedience to God. You see, if you can't obey your parents, the structure that God gave you, if you can't obey your parents who genuinely want nothing more than to provide for you and to see you develop into incredible men and women of God, then what makes you think that obedience to God will ever take place? The reality is, God gave us a family structure in many ways to learn this is how we're supposed to even respond to Him. I told you at the beginning that it was God who instituted the family. And as God instructs you to obey your mother and father, He is doing so in a manner of preparation so that you will be prepared to obey your heavenly Father as well. But obedience is not all that children are called to, even in this passage. Our passage calls us to honor your mother and father. Now, certainly this will include obedience, but it goes beyond obedience. It includes respect and love and gratitude. It's more than what I would call obedience with an attitude. There are times that we obey, but we don't like it. We do it because, well, we have to do it. There are times that we may feel the need to argue before we get to the point of obedience. There are times that we scream and cry and try to seek out another parent to try to get a different answer. And maybe there is a time for discussion, a time to help kids figure out what you're saying and why you're saying it. But sometimes, as a parent, the right answer is because I said so. And that's all the answer that you need. Sometimes you may not like that answer, but the truth is that's exactly the answer that you need. In those moments, obedience with an attitude is not the way that you honor your mom and dad. It's not the idea, I'm going to do what you said, but I'm going to make everyone else miserable along the way. Instead, it's I still don't like it, but I respect the fact that you're the one that God has placed over me. Remember, we're talking about parents to children. Some of y'all aren't in the home anymore. Guess what? You still need to hear this. Back when I was a youth pastor, I had a pretty diverse group of teenagers that we were working with. We had a bus ministry that picked up all kinds of kids that had little to no support from their parents. One night we did a parents' night as an attempt to just kind of help communication between the parents and their children. And it basically turned into an opportunity for kids to complain about their parents. They filled out note cards, parents and kids both filled out note cards with questions for the other. There were no names on it, so you weren't supposed to be able to tell who it was. But, you know, when you ask certain questions like, why didn't you let me stop and pick up that cat on the side of the road? Well, mom knows which kid said that. So anyways, it turns into basically a gripe session. After about 4 questions in a row about why won't you ever let me do whatever, and you can fill in the blank, one of the students stood up. Her name, and I don't mind giving you the name because most of y'all probably aren't going to know her anyways. In fact, none of you will. Her name was Vanity. Beautiful name for a beautiful young lady. Her parents were not present. She said, y'all don't know what you're asking for. The truth is, she said, I wish my parents cared enough to tell me no. I wish that my parents loved me enough to set boundaries. And here you are, she said, you've got what I want, but you wish you didn't have it. I'm going to tell you, at that moment, everybody shut up. All the parents stopped because they didn't need to say anything else. What that young lady said perfectly articulated what they wanted to say. They don't put rules in front of their kids because they want to limit them. It's because they love them, because they are often protecting them even from themselves. The kids no longer asked any more questions, because at that moment, they had heard a completely different perspective than they had ever thought of before. We wrapped up pretty quickly, and immediately myself and a couple other people made our way over to Vanity to love on her and let her know that even though she felt like she didn't have anyone who loved her at home, she had people who loved her right there. I'm going to tell you, as a parent, the only reason we do what we do is because we love you. Because we want more than anything for you to know what it is to be a man or a woman of God. I've had students when I'm teaching at Southern Wesleyan University, and sometimes they almost act like I have to be there. Well, the truth is they don't pay hardly anything. I don't have to be there. I don't put time into preparing a lesson just for the sake of doing it because I have to do it. I do it because I love those kids and I want to see them succeed. Every parent in here will tell you the exact same thing. So be obedient, but do so with respect, love, and gratitude. There are those who wish they had someone to tell them no. It might not be you. Be grateful you do have someone. I want to take this one step further, still dealing with honoring our parents, though. And again, this is not just for the young kids. This is for all of us. Honoring your parents continues long after you leave the home. In fact, the way you live your life now very much reflects your parents. If you're an angry person who constantly lashes out at others, what does that say about the way you were raised? If you're one of those negative people who always has a complaint about anything and everything, even if you're right about some of those things, what does all of that negativity suggest about your parents? Or let's take it in the complete opposite direction. If you're one of those folks who have no boundaries and you live without restraint, you just do whatever you want because you figure, I can do whatever I want. What does that say about the way that you were raised? Listen to me, the best way to honor your mother and father is to demonstrate love for Christ and an attitude that they would be proud of. There have been many times when I've had people compliment my children for their attitude. It's actually good that they're not here because I don't want them to get bigger heads than they already got. There have been many times that I have had people compliment my children for their attitude or their hard work. And my first thought is, are you sure you're talking about my kids? I know that they are good kids, but I think I sometimes just want a little bit more of it in the home. But then I think about the fact that they are bringing me great honor when they behave well outside of the home. There's one more thing that goes with this. It's not just the Apostle Paul who is sharing these thoughts because he's watched other parents and they're doing a great job, or because he saw some kid acting up at the mall and he's thinking, you know what, if this kid can melt down, he needs his parents to give him a whooping. That's not what spurs this on. He is sharing instruction that is based on what the Ten Commandments say. In other words, this is foundational stuff. This is important stuff to both the Jewish faith and the Christian faith. Exodus 20, verse 12, part of the Ten Commandments says, honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. It is the fifth commandment. It is the only one that comes with a promise. If you honor your mother and father, the Lord promises that you will live long. And according to verse 3 of our passage today, it says, it will go well with you. Wouldn't it be great to live with that kind of promise? Well, that's the kind of promise that is available to every person in this room today. As we recognize that the family is a gift from God, he says you need to make sure you handle it the way you should. You know, there's one last call within today's passage, and it's the one that I touched on at the very beginning. But this one's more about the parent to the child. And I'll try to wrap this up pretty quick because I'm trying to be better about getting y'all out on time. Verse 4 said, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." Actually, if you read that in the NIV, I think it says, "Do not provoke your children to wrath." So that's what happens so often is parents tend to provoke their children to wrath. Well, what does that look like? Sometimes it may be us being too harsh on them. Maybe it's us being unfair with them. We've got expectations for them. You've got to live up to this standard, knowing that that's probably not as realistic as it should be. Another possibility of what causes people to become so bitter in the home is neglect or absence. What is it that provokes children to wrath when the dad is supposed to be home, yet he is not? Or maybe mom and dad are both home, but they're so disengaged with the family because they're so focused on other things going on that they really aren't a part of their kids' lives. And it frustrates the kids. I'm going to tell you that as parents, you get one shot with these kids. Get your money's worth. Be there for them. Spend the time with them. Enjoy them. And allow them to see in you what it is to be a man or a woman of God. Sometimes we can be overly critical. Sometimes we can be inconsistent in our parenting, and it breeds resentment. Parents, realize that you represent God's authority and God's love for them. What a privilege it is. Make sure you do it well. Bring them up, it said, in the training or in the discipline of the Lord. Discipline is an act of love, as according to Hebrews 12, verse 6, where we are told, the Lord disciplines those whom he loves. You may not like being disciplined. I don't like it. But because I love my kids, I will discipline my kids. Teach your children that there is accountability. And if they can't handle accountability in front of us, how much more will they have to struggle with accountability in front of God? Bring them up not only in the training or the discipline of the Lord, bring them up in the instruction or the admonition of the Lord. And this will be the last point that I bring to you today. Instruction means teaching, counseling, and the third word that I have is modeling. It's not enough for you to tell your kids that this is what you must do. It's not enough for you to be there to counsel them, to redirect them when they're going in the wrong direction. You also need to model it for them. You can tell them all the right things, but if you're not willing to live it in front of them, you send them a mixed message and it does nothing but cause confusion and frustration. The point of this, parents, you want your kids to be the people that God created them to be. You need to lead the way. You need to make sure that when they look at your life, they see someone who genuinely loves the Lord. There's a verse that I used with you in the very first message in this series. I want to remind you of it. It's the responsibility of parents. This is the most important thing that we can do. Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 and 7. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. In other words, it's not just when you're in church on Sunday. It's not just when everybody else is looking at you because you think the kids are present and therefore I need to make sure I behave. I don't turn on the righteousness of God and turn it off whenever it's convenient. If I am to be the man of God that I need to be, it's not a part-time gig. It's what I do all the time. Our kids are incredibly smart. They see things, and you think, well, they don't even know that I'm doing those things. It's not true. Your kids are smart, and they can figure out what it is to be real. You're this way with one individual, and then you're this way with another individual, and the kids are saying, which way is real? What if we simply made Jesus Christ the center of our lives all the time? And then our kids wouldn't have to wrestle with which one is real. I told you this is not just about the family, this is about the church as well. In every family, everyone has different roles. That includes even the church family. Every role is important. It's important that those who may be brothers or sisters or parents, they fill their role. Kids, they fill their role. We need each other. You can't just decide, well, you know what, the church is fine if I don't do my part. I'm going to tell you, this church family is incomplete without you fulfilling the role God gave you. There's another generation that's going to come after you. What will that generation look like? The truth is, part of what I described to you earlier was a generational story where you've got a grandmother who has poured into her daughter, who has poured into her daughters, and now one of those daughters has kids of her own and she's pouring into her daughters. And you've got this chain where basically godliness is being passed down from generation to generation. What will the next generation look like based on your faithfulness to your family? Will your kids follow Christ? I recognize that some of y'all come from ugly families, and I don't mean that as an insult. It just, things didn't happen the way it should have happened when you were growing up. Maybe for some of you, today is the day that you decide, I'm no longer going to walk that path. We're going to start a new one. And I'm going to make sure that this path honors the Lord.